Hello everyone! Thank you all very much for coming. There's still a few people trickling in, that's absolutely fine. Also, the schedule this evening, we do have a 5-minute break. So if there's friends that want to join you later on this evening, let them know that they can come at that time. That's going to be 8:45 to 8:50. Welcome to the St Andrews Union Debating Society, the oldest and some might say finest of its kind. This evening we're breaking with tradition and doing a panel. We do one sort of once or twice every year. Tonight's panel is sort of especially relevant, as I'm sure is not something that's lost on any of you. That being said, we would like to preface this evening by saying a few things. One is that we're incredibly sensitive to the fact that the consequences of the Trump administration are a real prospect for many of you. And we would like to stress that tonight's discussion is one centred around geopolitics, and our panellists have been chosen because of their specialisms in this field. This being said, we understand that the discussion this evening may be troubling, and we've designated room 1.06 as a quiet space for anyone who would like to step out for a moment, and contact information for support services is also available in the order paper. We trust that everyone will be respectful this evening so that we can have an informative and thought-provoking discussion about what the Trump administration means for global politics. We will be recording the panel discussions, that's the first 45 minutes, but we won't be recording the Q&A. So after we come back for the break, nothing from then on will be recorded. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll provide you with a little bit of context and then we'll dive straight into the panel discussion this evening. So, on the 20th of January 2025, Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States of America, with J.D. Vance as Vice President. Those in attendance at the inauguration included the families of both incoming and outgoing presidents and vice presidents, respectively, former presidents including Barack Obama, Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. Multiple representatives of big business appeared, including the Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, Meta founder Mark Zuckerberg, also the leaders of Apple and the CEO of TikTok. Notable absences from the event included former First Lady Michelle Obama and former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. In the just over 2 weeks since the inauguration, the Trump administration has made many declarations and executive orders. A non-exhaustive list of these includes implementing blanket tariffs on imports from Mexico, China and Canada, freezing refugee admissions, declaring a national border emergency, and the preparation of a migrant detention center at Guantanamo Bay, the development of an American Iron Dome, removing barriers to AI innovation and postponed the ban on TikTok, leaving the World Health Organization and Paris Climate Agreement, as well as ending the Green New Deal, announced plans to buy Greenland, prompting Anders Vistisen, a Danish member of the European Parliament, to tell President Trump in no uncertain terms to fuck off, and most recently announced a plan towards gaining long-term ownership of the Gaza Strip. Many of these proposed actions have proved controversial, shockingly, and have sparked backlash both domestically and internationally, with many questioning what the president may do next and what these declarations and executive orders mean for international relations and global politics. A lot to get through. Here with me this evening to discuss the ramifications of these acts are three wonderful scholars, each with a different specialism and perspective. Could we go down the line and have our panellists introduce themselves and their specialism, a little bit about their work, and we'll start with you.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to see you this evening. My name is Murray Leith. I'm a professor of political science at the University of the West of Scotland. I am Scottish and American in many respects, having lived in and grown up in both of those countries. My work, even though my recent research is on the Scottish diaspora, especially in North America, I have been teaching, lecturing and researching American politics for over 30 years. In fact, my first PhD work was on executive legislative relations and theories, which is actually fairly suitable, although that stuff is very, very dusty and older than most of you. So, as I say, I have been speaking publicly about American presidential politics for the last 20 years in Scotland, and it generally draws a large crowd, and it's very, very popular on the media every 4 years for that reason. And of course, I would simply say that Donald Trump is, of course, the most Scottish of American presidents ever. Okay, his mother was Scottish, so that makes him half Scottish and worth remembering when we talk about him very shortly.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is David Anderson. I'm an associate professor of United States politics at Durham University. This is my 6th year now in country. Before that, I taught at a number of universities in the United States. I spent 6 years in the state of Iowa, which if you study American politics, you will know every 4 years, Iowa gets the first shot at nominating presidential candidates. It is an absolutely wonderful place to go and meet presidential candidates, to watch presidential campaigns, and to learn how campaigns function. My research is on political psychology. I like to focus on voters, how voters actually learn about politics and political candidates, how what they learn shifts their opinions and shifts their beliefs. And currently I am one of these political scientists who is fascinating, studying how Americans are changing their beliefs right now. It's a pretty incredible time to study this stuff. We'll talk a lot about it, I guess, tonight.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Anderson. Professor Fawn.
Hello, I'm the local guy, Rick Fawn from the School of International Relations. I work generally on international security, but particularly across a whole range of countries, from the Central Europeans down to the Balkans, across the Caucasus, Central Asia, something called Russia, long-standing working and other connections to Ukraine. But, you're hearing a North American accent, and you may be registering the fact that I use the adjective North American, which probably signals that I am also Canadian. I've always remained a citizen and an interested citizen in Canada, but have not worked professionally on it. And I'm very, very conscious, working in and on a bunch of other countries, what it means to study professionally a place. And I don't profess ever to do that with Canada. There are people in Canada, outside Canada too, but people inside Canada who do that round the clock. But however, still as a citizen, there are a great number of things that have concerned me, and have concerned me very deeply in the preceding, say, 3 months, to which I would speak to. And that includes a slightly ironic setup in late October, where I was prompted in a public setting in another country to comment on the global implications of what the Trump presidency would be. And I'll elaborate a bit. Don't be shocked, but I will elaborate a bit. It's just that I couldn't imagine so quickly and so shockingly that things could look as they are. And we'll speak about that. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Can we have an encouraging round of applause for our panel?
Oh, you're clapping now.
Wonderful, okay, so we'll kind of start off the discussion this evening then. So there's normally a sort of general consensus regarding the kinds of policies and sort of things that a president will implement during their first sort of days and weeks in office. Would it be fair to say that we've seen many policies that were to be expected, but there's also a pretty healthy dose of unexpected decisions that weren't and also perhaps couldn't have been anticipated? If I could ask each of you to choose from the decisions that the administration has taken so far, what do you think is the most, I suppose, one that couldn't be anticipated, but also which is the most likely to come to fruition? Should we start with Dr. Anderson?
Oh, good.
Could I just clarify, is that the same question? Most unexpected and most likely to be...
Two separate questions, really. Okay. I've sort of slid one under the radar, yeah. Right. But I suppose let's divide that into two questions then. So starting off with, which do you think is the decision that has come, most shockingly?
Well, the most shocking has got to be that the United States is going to seize Gaza. For a president who campaigned, and I believe steadfastly believes, that the United States should stop foreign intervention, should stop sending its military abroad, should stop occupying places, pretending that it can install democracy and make a happy Disneyland wonderland, to then say, no, we're just going to seize the most volatile region in the world and turn it into a resort. That was unexpected. Nobody really saw that one coming. There's a great video where you can watch his chief of staff as he's speaking these words, and her head explodes because she had no inkling that this was on the cards.
Right, so unexpected not just to the general populace, but also to his own administration.
Yes.
Right, okay.
I'm actually going to trump.
Ooh.
Sorry, I had to get it in early. I was worried you were going to use it, or Rick was going to use it. No, I would actually go to his inauguration speech, because I never thought I'd hear him say, "We're taking it back," when he was talking about the Panama Canal. This isn't a policy that he announced. I mean, you know, this is inauguration speeches. As inauguration speeches go, it was
Dreadful?
yes, awful, but also not a speech, inauguration speech. It was a campaign. But that wasn't Trump off record, you know, off the, you know, the trodden path, like when he was talking about Gaza. This had clearly gone through 3 or 4 people, and that announcement was there for the record. And it's nuts, because it's in the same category. It's an announcement that we're going to take back somebody else's sovereign territory.
Professor Fawn?
If it's only one, it would have to be the Gaza speech.
Right.
And he's going to have a hard time trumping himself on something like that. But if we didn't have that, I think it has to be this cluster of ideas of disrupting the most productive, I would say even, and how often do we use this word when we talk about international relations? One of the most beautiful relationships. And that is that there could be several candidates, but it really has to be the US-Canada relationship. Right? This is a relationship that, you know the War of 1812? And you know the joke, the War of 1812 lasted until actually 1816. So in 1814, the British Canadian forces came down and did what? Burnt the executive mansion, right? And it took so much white paint to cover up the burn marks, right? But after that, what a relationship. In every conceivable sense. And do we want some IR theory? No! But this grand idea, Keo 8 and 9, of complex interdependence, you know, that was looking at this relationship and asking not only how it was not conflictual, especially when you had such an asymmetric relationship, but also so incredibly fruitful. And to me, on the scale of being surprised, again, Gaza up there, but that so much could be, and I think recklessly, shattered in a few sentences.
So that sort of answers the next question about which do you think, you know, of the things that you've chosen, which is the most likely to come to fruition? Would you say that relationship has already been irreparably fractured, I suppose?
If the aim is to fracture, and I think disruption is a big part of this. I mean, it's much easier to disrupt than to build. Then that's been achieved.
Okay.
Right? And it's saddening in some ways. I don't know if there are other Canadians in the room, that don't have to be, or people who follow a bit of Canadian politics, right? I mean, the impact that this had on the ruling Liberal Party was just astonishing. I mean, it perhaps says something structural about the party at the time, but that really a few sentences could have the effect in a country that it did is absolutely striking.
Very interesting.
And that's a negative achievement, but it's a heck of an achievement.
Yeah. Definitely. And then in terms of sort of carrying on that thread of the thing that's sort of most likely to come to fruition.
So I would actually go to the use of tariffs to bully international relations.
Right.
And I think it's an important thing when we're talking about President Trump. Both Republicans and Democrats in the United States agree that you cannot take him seriously. He's not a serious man in that what he says is not necessarily what he wants. It's not what he means. He uses rhetoric in a bizarre way. And he's using tariffs to bully other nations. But what he just did with Canada and with Mexico is he said, I'm going to put in serious tariffs, and then you're going to have to do exactly what you're already doing right now. I've won! So I'll suspend the tariffs. And everybody's confused. But for Trump, that's a big victory. He just threatened the use of tariffs, which all the experts say, you don't want to do this. This is trade wars. It's really bad economics. Don't do it. And Trump says, no, I'm going to do it because I'm strong and powerful. But if you looked at what he demanded that Mexico and Canada do things that they're largely already doing. So the concessions were made before the threat, and Trump gets to declare victory. He loves this because he's not playing to the international community. He's not playing to academics. He's not playing to honesty. He's playing to his base of supporters. And his supporters feel like he just won. He bullied Mexico and Canada into submission. Trump is strong. No other president has been able to do this. And I think we're going to see this over and over and over, where he's going to bring his policies into fruition by bullying people to do exactly what they're already doing.
And we saw him take credit for the ceasefire as well.
Oh yeah,
which
Gaza
happened
ceasefire.
before he was in office.
Yes, and this is kind of the Trump legacy. We'll probably get to this later on as well, but one of Trump's major goals for this presidency is he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. He is absolutely furious that President Obama got one. And he hates Obama with the passion of a burning sun. So he wants to one-up everything that Obama did, and he's desperate for a Nobel Peace Prize. And to get one, he has to solve a major conflict. So Gaza, he's already trying to claim credit for, because he wants the prize.
This seems maybe counterintuitive to a certain degree in terms of your answer to the initial question, which was the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
I mean, to stoke something like that whilst trying to somehow win a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, that's because it ties into what I think and what most worries me about what he will bring to fruition, which is the repoliticization of the American civil service structures. It took years, if you study, and I know many people in the room do, but your average person doesn't really appreciate how politicized America was in its early decades,
right,
and how divided it was in its early decades. And it took America a while to semi-depoliticize its civil service structure, and he's rapidly dismantling that, and the people around him are rapidly dismantling that as we sit here and speak. And it's going to take a long time. I think that it's going to work, and it's part of the dismantling process and the disruptive process, and I think it's going to take a long time to come back from that, because he's not just disrupting the relationship between the United States and Canada, and the United States and other countries that have taken, decades to build, and the special relationship with the UK. He's dismantling the internal structures that keep politics out of certain key areas of the American constitutional, legal, social, and political system. And it's getting blown up overnight.
I suppose as well, so since the election, Trump has made several declarations regarding the expansion of US territory, which is something that you've both just touched on, with what can be called an aggressive plan for foreign policy, specifically relating to Canada, Panama Canal, Greenland, and now Gaza. Is there a danger in dismissing these statements as grandstanding? And what do you think is the likelihood of these threats actually materializing?
I learned a long time ago when it comes to Donald Trump, never say never.
Right.
Put it this way, California, they got to turn the taps on. So what do people do? They open a couple of lake reservoirs that have absolutely no use whatsoever, and exacerbate a problem by releasing water into areas that don't need it. And do they do that on his immediate order? No. They do it because they're people that work for Trump and people that are part of the system are attempting to preempt his decision-making process, working towards what the leader wants.
Right.
And that's dangerous. That's how you start problems, be they environmental or political or even military.
Picking up on that in terms of sort of the people working for Trump now, we've seen a Trump administration before, obviously, but many sort of commentators have stated that they feel that there are significant differences this time around, and many people are alarmed by the more explicit connection with big tech. So what do you think it means to have people like Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook actually stood behind Donald Trump during parts of the inauguration? I mean, what message is that sending? What does that say about this new administration, and why might that be kind of different to what we've seen before? I don't know if Professor Fawn wanted to...
Question to me. I'm very tempted to come back on the fruition of global policy.
Okay, yeah, we can go back.
But on this, I would be surprised if we are surprised. It means, I'm tempted to call Tim Cook, as Trump called Tim Cook, as Tim Apple. The presence of Tim Apple and Bezos and Musk and so on, I think we know what this means. It means that you can buy your way into the highest echelons of political power.
Right.
It is an extraordinary statement in the theatrical setup of the inauguration. On one side, the Republicans, the family, the inner sanctum of the Republicans, but also the techno-oligarchs. Right? I think it was there to be seen. Right? And they bought places there, literally to be there, but they bought places in a bigger way as well. Right? And I do think, let's try not to laugh, I do think that Joe Biden meant well in his demission speech about the warning and the very obvious parallel he was making to the Eisenhower speech. Remember that Eisenhower was a leading American general in charge of winning Europe. And it was Eisenhower who warned about the military-industrial complex. We had Biden warning of the technocratic. Right? So I'd be fascinated in the discussion, but it's an important question. I'd be surprised if we have a different answer on that.
Okay.
Right? And it's really something to note.
Is that something you both sort of agree with?
Yeah. So I think it's important, again, thinking about Trump's second term. His first term is probably a really bad model to go off of because they're going to be completely different. In 2016, even Trump will admit he didn't expect to win the election. He had done zero work preparing to be president. He had no agenda. He had no plan. He didn't understand what the White House was and how administrative government worked. Famously, his son toured the White House and did not know that it was staffed with partisan people who would leave on Inauguration Day. And they discovered they had to hire 6,000 people, and they didn't know who these people were going to be. So in 2016, Trump turned to the Republican Party, he turned to Mitch McConnell in the Senate. And Mitch McConnell said, "Don't worry, Mr. President, I'll build you a team." And they put in, wrapped layers of protection around Trump of establishment Republicans who were going to do what the Republican Party wanted to do. And Trump spent about 3 years flailing wildly until he drove all these people away. And he brought in loyalists. This time he's starting out with loyalists. This time he's hired people who understand how American government works and who can pull the levers of power, or more importantly right now, pull out those levers of power and smash the machine. So we're going to see a totally different Trump presidency this time around. What we're seeing first off from the inauguration is that he's invited the most powerful, wealthy techno bros in the world to line up behind him. Having Bezos and Musk next to each other. Oh, that's interesting. If you're not aware, Elon Musk has basically given up on Tesla. He's pretty much decided that Tesla is tapped out. He's made $400 billion off of it, but the electric car industry is now becoming competitive. So he shifted gears and he's on to space. And he needs SpaceX to get billions and billions of government contracts. Well, who's next to him? Jeff Bezos, who's doing the same game. He's made his fortune off Amazon. He's on to Blue Origin now. And these two guys are trying to convince Trump to use the levers of American government power to give space contracts to them. This is patronage. This is corruption. And it was out there in front of the world for everybody to see. It is the idea that American government and this neutral administration of government decision-making, that's all gone. We're in a heyday of billionaires fighting for government contracts. And that's going to change the whole system that we get to watch.
It's a grift. That's what Donald Trump knows best.
Right.
It's a grift. I mean, not only did he expect to win, but part of the reason he was running was to make money.
Yeah.
The first time around.
He did a good job of it.
And he did an excellent job of it, because he was going to go bankrupt again. I mean, this man's gone bankrupt how many times? Six times. And including a casino. How do you bankrupt a casino? People literally come in and give you their money. And you're going to win most of it. That's why casinos exist. But he managed it. And he managed it for a variety of reasons. But he sees it as a grift. He values two things: loyalty to him, nothing else, to him, and money. And this is a way for him to make money. Did you hear him about the big, beautiful ballroom? He said he could build a ballroom in the White House, a big, beautiful, only for $100 million, and he said, got one in Mar-a-Lago. Beautiful, beautiful. They built one in the White House. That's all he thinks about at the end of the day, is how's he going to make money off of this? And all the people surrounding him, the tech bros as well, but also the non-ideologues, the fellow travelers, the people who are there to make as much as they can, be it in power or money. Because somebody says they like money because you can buy power, but power gives you access to the people with money.
I would be presumptuous and add a couple of things. I very strongly agree with what has been said, including that the second Trump presidency is very different from the first. And let's remember that in the first presidency, he had around him real professionals. And I think dedicated Americans who put the brakes on things, who actually literally stopped things, like when Trump, on a whim, going to a NATO summit, was saying that he was going to pull the US out of it. There were over, as you know, more than 40 national security and military advisors of the highest echelon who worked with him in his first presidency, who came out publicly saying that he was unfit for office. There are none of those types of people in this second presidency. So let's take that on board as well. These dedicated, real professionals, real Americans, not loyal to some individual, who are not there. Plus this preparation time, which is really fundamental, and bringing in these people who are most fundamentally simply loyal, right? It's really a toxic situation.
So I suppose my question then, considering that this is what seems to be a very much more heavily curated administration and more kind of carefully implemented, who is your sort of kind of one to watch, I suppose, in the administration? Who is the person that you think, you know, maybe has either the greatest influence with the president, or is maybe somebody who we haven't really seen much of in the news lately, but you think may come to be somebody who's making headlines?
What's the immigration guy we were talking about earlier? Miller?
Miller.
Stephen Miller, thank you. Stephen Miller is the one I would watch. He is the head of Trump's thinking on immigration. He is the guy who's behind the massive deportation that the Trump administration is planning. And I think he believes in this. This is something he really believes is in the best interest of America, to round up 15 million people and push them out somehow. I think that is the policy that both Trump focused the most on during his campaign, so his base really wants to see it happen. I think they've put the most effort into thinking about the architecture of how you actually do that, and I think it's going to have the biggest impact on Americans, because you don't round up 15 million people without TV cameras watching you do it. And this could be a horrifying scene to watch. As deportations begin, they've already begun, but again, with Trump, he claims victory for things that are already happening. Yeah, there are planes of deportees leaving the United States currently. They've been doing this for about 30 years. There's always an active deportation program. But we're talking about ramping it up 10 times, 20 times. And I think that's the plan that will get the most media attention, will have the biggest impact. And Stephen Miller is the face behind it.
Can I jump in there? Because one, I absolutely agree. We were having this conversation slightly earlier. But you're right about the visuals. When we think of the civil rights movement of the 50s and the 60s, and of course we must remember that continued long after that, and it, in many ways it's still going on, but we'll probably get back to that. It's not so, I mean, and don't get me wrong, the freedom riders, the Montgomery bus boycott, these are all terribly important things. But it's the images of policemen beating people with very large batons, setting dogs on people, American citizens, men, women, and children. That's what ordinary Americans went, whoa, we got to do something. These people have rights. And you got to remember, America then moves from being a segregated society to a more inclusive one. It takes a while, but it's the imagery beamed into people's everyday homes, and we're going to be seeing a lot of that imagery.
So I would pick up on that, and this is the horrifying thing of the age we live in. is, can you trust the images you see anymore? No. In the 1960s, when the civil rights movement was in full swing in the United States, everybody watched the same 3 TV channels. They were all edited by 3 networks. They carried the same footage. Everybody trusted what they saw with their eyes. It's not going to happen this time. This time you're going to have 1/3 of America who turns into the nightly news on cable TV, and they see people dragged out of their houses with their children crying and screaming, and they're going to be horrified. But then if you flip the channel, you're going to see something completely different on Fox News, which is going to try to support Trump. So they won't show any of this damaging video of the consequences of deportation. They'll probably throw up statistics about how crime is plummeting. And then you're going to have 1/3 of America who just doesn't tune in anymore. They don't want to hear it. We're in a new age where we have no understanding of how people are going to consume information and how they're going to react to an objective reality around them.
Question of which individual most to watch. The unappointed one, Elon Musk. Right? This is, you can watch the confirmation hearing. Sometimes they're amusing. You must have seen Bernie Sanders and the onesies, right? This is an important process. And Hegseth can still get through, some of them are going to get through. Elon Musk doesn't have that, right? This guy is in the inner sanctum of power with no process and no accountability. This is a guy who's now been afforded the Social Security numbers of millions of Americans and much more. This is somebody, as has been very rightly said, has the deepest interests in US government contracts, who is slashing on an entirely arbitrary basis all kinds of other government spending. Right? It's an astonishing situation, I think. And I would go back to the inauguration because among the many things that Trump said, he said 2 things that were relevant to Elon Musk. And in terms of televisuals, we certainly saw Elon Musk gesticulate, not with his right arm out fully at that point as it would be later. He did so when Trump mentioned, and scientifically this sounds pretty bizarre, that we're going to put people on the moon, people on Mars, right? Elon Musk was ecstatic at that announcement. He was not shown when Trump mentioned a few minutes earlier about basically the end of electric cars, right? And back to that point, Elon Musk either has adjusted or has lost something big, and all the more that he's going to go on the space race. The last thing I would say about Musk is that there is going to have to be multiple clashes of interests. Mega egos, Trump, Musk, others but Trump, Musk. The social media side, right? Both of them love that. Both of them get, I think, great vibes from that, but that's a lot of their potency, right? They're competing against each other day in, day out now with that. And then the money, the graft. This is really another toxic situation. Right? And I would just make one other point that extends back to that. You have this contradiction perhaps about Tesla and the Mars race. We have overall, I think, a situation where it's not exactly half and half, but one share of the Trump agenda is actually mapped out. There is thinking here. Project 25, a big plan to bring in lots and lots of their people through every level of government while curtailing, breaking lots of other things. Look what was done to the FBI, USAID, in a matter of hours. There is plan on one hand, and yet there is utter impulsivity at the other. And this is a really strange, if not pretty poisonous, arrangement. Because if you at least knew that this is the plan, that's one thing. But if you have these absolutely out of the nowhere big things, be it Gaza or many others, and then have that together, how on earth does anybody try to do basic business, let alone try to understand, in terms of daily life, but how does anybody deal with this within the United States and globally?
I think it would be interesting to touch on for a moment and to pick up the figure of Elon Musk, because he is somebody who has this kind of unelected role, and also a role that seems to be very loosely defined in the administration. He's also somebody that seems to have less than a favourable view of the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, which was evident from many of his tweets over the summer, criticising the government, but also Sir Keir Starmer's time as the head of the Crown Prosecution Service. And Musk was also rumoured to be donating significant sums of money to Nigel Farage's party Reform UK. How great do you think well, you've sort of already answered this in terms of how great his influence is, but how damaging do you think his views on Britain could be to British politics? Can maybe start with Professor.
Well, let's see. We've seen how damaging they are in American politics in the last few days.
Right.
I mean, as I say, we're just talking about dismantling USAID, the FBI, destroying, everything they can get their little hands into. Although it's interesting today, of course, that a judge has put a limit on what they can do certainly with the Social Security Administration, and we'll see if that holds. We'll see if those barriers hold, because they're the only ones going up. It is, in my opinion, a problem when you can introduce unlimited amounts of money into the everyday. Britain, of course, has very strict rules about what you can spend on a campaign, but we haven't yet caught up with the fact that campaigns are now run constantly. Donald Trump figured that out and was running a campaign from 2016 onwards.
Right.
And officially announced his campaign, of course, the day after the 2020 election, and started running again then. And what I think the British political establishment has to do is learn that lesson. We talk about people like Elon Musk, and Nigel Farage is, of course, a political disruptor. He's a man who's made his living disrupting politics in a variety of political vehicles, and the latest one, Reform, which isn't even a political party. It's a company which he controls. And this is what gives him the ability to make massive disruptions. So I think we've got to realize that Elon Musk has the clear capacity to undertake hugely disruptive influences in British politics, and once again, no guardrails, none whatsoever. Set up a business in Britain and boom, you can donate money to a British political institution of any kind.
Right.
It's a problem.
So there's a lot there. I would say, I think it's important for the UK to realize right now that the special relationship that has existed for 100, 200 years is over. It's gone because Trump does not care. Trump has no loyalty to the UK. For the next 4 years at least, there is no special relationship. And the more this country tries to convince the United States that it's an important thing, the more it's just going to waste its time. I think Trump's view of foreign policy is transactional. What can he get from a negotiation? And I don't think he believes the UK is a big enough place to get anything valuable out of. As part of the European Union, yes, huge economy there. But as the 12th largest economy in the world, I don't think Trump looks at the UK as an important partner anymore. He's willing to mostly bypass it.
Golf courses.
Golf courses, yeah. He likes his golf courses.
I'm serious. That's the one thing we have got that he would like another couple of. This is the home of golf.
Yeah.
It's his mother's home. He wants a couple of golf courses.
I was going to ask, I suppose, whether or not then you think that although the kind of special relationship is severed, just doesn't exist anymore, do you think that there is a different relationship that exists between Trump and Scotland and Trump and England? And if so, do you think that that may cause friction and damage the relationship between Scotland and England in the coming 4 years?
You're looking
Well, I'm looking, I suppose I'm looking in general.
I would take a step back and ask everybody to take a deep breath. I have my doubts as to how much the special Anglo-American relationship really existed irrespective of Trump. I think it was frayed a long time ago, and I'd also say, you go to Washington, everybody there is vying to have the special relationship, and there are many there who think they have the special relationship. And yeah, I come from Canada, and we always thought that we were the best of friends, right? So there's another special relationship there that is meaningless. Okay, so we need to step back. I absolutely agree on the transactional approach to global affairs. And this is really sickening because probably many of you are aspiring to diplomats, and if there's something quintessential that diplomats do, and I have lots of friends who are exiting the US State Department who spend years, decades cultivating relationships. You know, these are things done quietly and cumulatively that have real impact, but in a less tangible, visible way. You can shatter that very quickly, right? Trump has done that with the Denmark. It's not to say that this couldn't be repaired. It probably has to be repaired by somebody else. So this is at least interim damage. But these are really good relationships built over decades, right? And they matter when there are crises. So that's a big part of the cost. So asking the question about Trump's influence in Britain, between England and Scotland, you know, we can debate it. I don't think it's a big agenda item. You know, I agree, you know, he's a megalomaniac about the golf courses. You know, Gaza, if it gets his way, is going to be a big golf course, right? But it's not the only thing on his agenda, right? And I don't think that, I mean, if it's reduced to getting golf courses here, fine. But, you know, it's not bigger than that. I don't think it's on his radar. Yeah.
The one thing I would add here is back to Musk. How is Musk going to influence domestic politics? It's by flooding it with American politics. The United States has the best campaign apparatus in the world, and it's because there are always political campaigns being waged in the United States. It's a consequence of federalism, 50 states. The presidential campaigns just wound down. Everybody who didn't join the administration, they went to New Jersey and Virginia, where there are gubernatorial campaigns, and they practice and they test market new messages. And those people are also going to come here, and Republicans are going to talk to the conservatives and the Reform Party, and they're going to build messages, and they've learned what worked really well in the US. And I can tell you right now, 4 years when the next election is, probably the Reform Party is going to have a slogan that is going to kill labor. I'm calling it right now, labor is going to get slaughtered. The only question is whether the Conservative Party takes away enough votes to allow labor to keep close to a majority. But reform's coming, and it's with Musk's campaign help. All the legwork, all the money that is usually spent in a campaign, yeah, the UK restricts the spending here, but it's being spent in the US, testing messages on human beings with very similar experiences and seeing how they react. And that's gonna hit you guys in about 3 years. And it's gonna be something.
Yeah, it's already here. It's already here. I mean, that's where we get reform. You know, and the use of themes, as you say, that have been developed in the United States and other places have been played here. As to the impact on the relationship between Scotland and England, well, you know, there are plenty of people that dislike the, you know, Westminster and dislike the Union and you know, but those people probably dislike Trump more, so there, you know, there's that element to it. I mean, we've got an election next year here in Scotland, of course, and the SNP's already had their Christmas present. That was the Labour Party winning. And in Westminster, that's probably the one thing that's going to keep the SNP being the largest party. You know, probably not majority again. Those things are flukes, and you know, people are still scratching their head trying to figure out how that happened this time, last couple of times around. No, I don't think Trump's going to have an impact on the internal relationships, you know, between Scotland and the wider UK. I think that's playing out, you know, as part of the system. I think, you know, certainly fully agree. Elon Musk and his ilk, the political system has changed drastically. The old establishment politics across the westernized democracies is gone. We called it populism for 20 years, and the rise of populism. And that always irks me a little bit because of a variety of, you know, political science reasons that I won't go into. But that's what we're looking at, that movement that we've called populism, and I think is something slightly different.
Okay.
That's what we're going to see, and as you say, it's all being played out already, and we're just going to see waves of that from the United Kingdom, continental Europe, as well as other places.
Thank you. So there's a lot that we have gotten through and a lot that we've yet to touch on. So we haven't spoken explicitly about sort of NATO, about the Paris Climate Agreement, about some of Trump's decisions that may kind of infringe on the 14th Amendment. So we are going to take a 5-minute break, and when we come back it's going to be a Q&A, audience Q&A. So I'm expecting a lot of these things will come up, and we'll pop back again in 5 minutes, and at that point obviously the camera won't be recording anymore as well. Okay? Thank you everyone.
Thank you.